Okay, so Jessica, you had mentioned when you're talking about like overused phrases that I took a deep breath is something that like is overused. And so they were wondering, a lot of people were wondering if there's like some examples or techniques for taking something that's overused and doing it in a unique way, or is it like, is there a unique way to do it so it's not overused? And maybe some examples.
If it's a cliche, if it's been said before, you probably shouldn't say it. And unless cliches belong in dialogue, I don't think they belong anywhere else. Do you, Kirby? People are saying they can't see me. Am I cut off?
You're just a little low on the screen, but I can see you fine. For someone, if you're on a phone, move to the left if you can. I think you're fine. And maybe if they're in a smaller screen, maybe it's a little cut off. So if you're on your phone, maybe like turn it landscape so you can see us all.
Kirby, what do you have to say about cliches?
Are we talking about cliche phrases? Yeah, I agree. I think essentially, when I start seeing cliches, it feels to me like there's a lack of originality of kind of expression. And I think in general, and this relates to a larger kind of idea about surprise, which I think is really key to like a good read, is when you come upon a phrase, when you come upon a scene, when you come upon an action that feels unfamiliar yet true at the same time, and that goes for the phrasing that you use as well.
And one thing that's just a little tip is when you're writing a scene and you don't quite know where it's going to go, just always ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen here? And what thing has never been said before? Characters have to surprise all the time. I really agree.
And then this question is for Kirby. When you rep an author, is it an exclusive arrangement? Is it only for a specific project? Kind of what is I know every agent is different, but what's your feeling about, repping the author themselves, individual book? I'm assuming authors cannot work with multiple agents.
Yeah, it is an exclusive relationship, at least as it pertains to a specific project. What I have seen some people do is split certain kinds of genre representation, and that's primarily with respect to like children's and adult fiction or something like that. So I've seen that, but generally we work exclusively with a writer on all that they do. Yeah.
When I would assume too that it's a little bit more tricky, like when you're managing the author's career and kind of shaping that to like have it the project split up.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky. I think with a lot of the the editorial relationships we have, and in terms of managing other kinds of rights too, you want one hub for all of that, and it helps keep your projects kind of coordinated. One thing that we haven't that I didn't mention before is that there are non-compete clauses in a lot of these contracts, and so if you sign a project and a contract on one thing, well, if there's something else that starts percolating with another agent, and they do another deal for you, that may be in conflict with the deal that you have, but neither of the agents are kind of aware. And so it's just harder to coordinate, and you don't want to get into any kind of, sticky situations that way.
Can I just ask, you said you do film rights too?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You do film rights also?
I don't really. When we do film, I'm generally working with co-agents. And so one thing that I mentioned this morning was that we always reserve film and TV and performance rights. But when we do, that 15% domestic commission is something that we split with our co-agent on the film side. So if I enlist WME or ICM or any of these other sub-agents who specialize in selling book to film or TV, they take 7.5% and I take 7.5%. But it's their expertise that we're relying on to do that part of it.
And then for Shizuka is curious if either of you can think of a book that has multiple points of view, where one point of view is first person and other points of view are third person. Ideally, as an example of doing this really well, and maybe as a broader topic, if you have ideas for books, great. But then also talking about different points of view and kind of tips, taboos, do's, don'ts, I think would be really helpful.
I think one of the Barbara Kingsolver's books was that the one that was in Africa? Poisonwood Bible, would that be it? I'm not sure if that's the name of it. So I know she's done it. I'm thinking of the Game of Thrones series, where I don't think, were they all third person? And I think there's a variety of viewpoints in that. If it's your first book and you're not that familiar with writing different viewpoints, I would say, try to go conservative on that. What do you think, Kirby? Unless you're really comfortable, it might not be a good idea to experiment.
Yeah, I probably agree. I think Philip Meyer's book, The Sun, was also switching perspectives. I just sold something as well that switched from first to third as well. It's a tricky thing, and anytime you deviate from just a kind of conservative standard, all first person or all third person narrative, you're adding another bar, I think, that you need to surpass in order to make it something of a certain high enough quality. I mean, it's tricky, but yeah, you're speaking generally of do's and don'ts. I'm not totally sure there are hard and fast rules necessarily.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
You just, everything you write, you have to be able to justify it. Well, this is why I switch viewpoints, because this person just is so alive in my head, I have to do it in first person. But this person, you know what I mean? Still important, but, I want to be a little broader, something like that. Just justify every freaking word you write.
Yeah, I think that kind of it combines with a larger comment about just respecting your reader's time in a certain sense, and understanding that that everybody involved in this process can do anything else with their time. So you've really got to put a premium on keeping their attention. And so when I'm editing, I'm pretty harsh on my writers about pacing and about escalating at the right pace, and not taking for granted that, hey, if they're with me this far, then they'll hang out for a little longer while I digress about something that I want to do. We just not to take your readers' attention for granted.
I like that.
That's really good advice.
What, besides great writing, what are some strong qualities you want from a client? So what do you look for when you're taking on an author, likes, dislikes, other than just the writing?
Can I just answer really quick before Kirby? I have a really well-known agent, and she said the first thing that agents are looking for is someone who's not crazy. I just want to put that out there, so
Yeah.
Take it away.
Oh yeah, that's number one. Life's too short, right? What am I looking for aside from the writing? You're talking about the other elements. I think respect for the time that we're devoting, because a lot of times, as we mentioned before, this is a contingency arrangement, and so we're not getting paid anything unless this project works, right? But we're taking someone on in a way where it's taking away from our existing clients. So, we only have so many hours in the day, and the best way that we respect each other's time, one is, I respect and appreciate when my writers, I give them notes, and they may not agree with everything I'm saying or suggesting, but it does make them take a closer look at what I'm suggesting. And two, in terms of revisions, the revision process goes best when they take a project and spend the time to revise as far as they can before sending it over to me, and doing everything they can, and then I do everything I can, and then they do everything they can. And that's how we get to the best thing, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. And then, of course, just, I guess, in terms of, interpersonally, I think the time element is a big one, but also just to, manage expectations. I think this is a tricky line of work, and it's I've seen so many books where everything lines up, and it seems like it's gonna work in a big way, and it just doesn't. And I've seen many books where very little lines up, and just readers find it. And so we're dealing with art, and it's fickle. So at the end of the day, we're entertaining people. And let's just keep all that in perspective, I guess.
Yeah. And Jessica, you mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Can I just comment? People are saying that saying crazy was like rude of me. I was quoting my agent, first of all, and crazy is, it's not, it means people also that are just difficult, divas, that aren't collaborative, that think they're the most important person in the world, that are going to nag you all the time and send you, 10 emails a day. I have had those clients myself, so it's more like crazy is more like difficult. Is that, or demanding, maybe that's the right word too.
Yeah, I think that's how I took it too, was more, but that also has to do with kind of a chemistry, I think, and I think, just going there, what's really demanding to me might not be so demanding to another agent. That might just be the way that they roll. So when you get offered representation, it's really important to have a conversation about expectations. Are you a phone person? Are you an email person? Generally, how long does it take you to get back to me on some of the emails that I send? I generally take like a day or two. I toggle between phone and email, but if it can be done on email, I'd rather have a paper trail so that we can go back and refer to it. And then also in terms of how quickly I respond to revisions, right? And generally I tell them I'm going to get to it as soon as I can, but when you give me back a manuscript, I'm putting it in my queue, and it generally takes me within 2 months. And so, as a writer, it's hard to wait, right? That's a really hard time. You're anxious. You don't know what's going to come back. But knowing, what it's like in New York, you're waiting for the subway, and it tells you like it's 10 minutes before the next train arrives, and you're like, yeah, it's a long time, but knowing that makes it easier. And I think, again, having those conversations is important.
I always say that there's like publishing time, like how long things would happen on the other end. And then there's like writer time, it's kind of like dog years and human years, Sometimes it feels like a long time, and it's really hard, and you can't, you get to not be ignored, but you can't be a pain in the butt.
Well, I think this is a good reminder too for all the authors, because I think all these authors spend so much time trying to get an agent, and then when the agent offers representation, now it's a mutual interview process, right? Like you're both trying to figure out, like the author has spent so much time querying and begging, please read my work, please take me. And then it's a mindset shift to say, okay, now people want my work, but I need to figure out if this is the right fit. I assume it's the same for you, Jessica. You said your client roster is very full. You don't take on every project. You're interviewing, even though you want the job or want the work, you are interviewing them to make sure it's a good fit.
And be collaborative. Just be collaborative all through everything about publishing and writing. Be open and collaborative. I don't know how else to say that.
And then if you get, let's just see, Kirby, here's a quick question on rights. If someone is selling a series, how typical is it for the publisher to take like all the characters in that series, or can they write a short story with similar characters, even if it's just the book under contract? What are some kind of things for rights they should look out for?
I think the main thing, I think I think I need to answer that in a little bit of a roundabout way, which is for a publisher, the important thing at that moment of the deal is that they have the next book, right? That the next book that's out there is going to be this one, and it's going to be your next book. So, for instance, what you can't do is sell a book with a central character and then go to another publisher and say, I have a side character, but they're related in this world, and then sell that and then potentially have that come out before or compete in some way. It dilutes the value of what that initial publisher has bought. So it's not that you can't do other follow-ups or sequels or what have you. You will be able to, but that first next book and that deal is for this. Now, you also have an option clause. You have the publisher is going to have the right of first refusal on your next book in any case. And usually if you're doing a series, and let's just say you're Michael Connolly and you're doing a Harry Bosch series, what they're going to say is, in the contract, it'll say they have the right of first refusal on the next Harry Bosch book, right? And so that clock doesn't run until at least you deliver and the manuscript for the current book is accepted. So those are all things to know about series. Now, it's trickier when you get to film and TV. When film and TV companies get into buying the rights and developing something, they actually do take rights to all the characters in a series, actually. So that's something else.
So, and just quickly to add, a lot of times if you have a character and you are going to put it in a short, an anthology or something like that, or like Alfred Hitchcock or Ellery Queen magazine, that's pretty much usually allowed, correct? Because that's what I know some people have done, that they've used some recurring characters.
Can you repeat that? I'm so sorry about that, Jessica.
Sometimes if you've got a character in a series, for instance, and then there's a mystery character, a suspense character, and there's like Ellery Queen magazine, you can take your character and put it in a short story in an anthology. A lot of times that sort of, I think that's what they were talking about earlier. So that's allowed.
Yeah, I believe so. Because that doesn't dilute the value of a book sale at the end of the day. So yeah, I think so.
And it gives readers a different side of the character, which is really fun.
Yeah, agreed. And Jessica, or Kirby for that matter, Jessica, do you have any thoughts on self-publishing? There's been a few people who have mentioned that they're either they do self-publish or they intend to self-publishing. Any thoughts, pearls of wisdom, caveats?
Jessica?
I just a couple of things. I've got a former client, and she's gone on and had maybe a dozen books, women's fiction published, and she got to the point where she was not that crazy with her publisher anymore, and how much marketing they were doing. They weren't doing any editing for her, and she's kind of regrouping her whole career because she's got a bunch of readers and she's going to self-publishing. I know several people who have made a lot of money and done very well with self-publishing. I think looking at all the Hugh Howey information and his website and sort of what he did with his career, the world's really changing. The other thing I want to say is that a lot of self-published books haven't been worked on. They're not proofread. They're not copy edited. There's a lot of problems that show up within a couple pages. If you're going to do it right. You have to spend some money to make money. Those are my two things.
I think that the main thing is just going in with your eyes open, understanding what the challenges are. I think there are parts of the production process that you can actually control as long as Jessica was saying, you're willing to spend the money to invest in an editor, to invest in good, packaging and cover design and things of that nature. What is hard and what is sometimes insurmountable is reviews and actual distribution into bookstores. So those are the kinds of things that are really tough. And finally, there definitely are people who do very well. I think it's more people in genre categories have success. Like you mentioned Hugh Howey or I think Colleen Hoover, I think. There have been, romance or, certain sci-fi they do all right. But it's hard if you don't have the ability to let people know that the book is even out there sometimes. So yeah.
Most self-publishing typically sells about 200 copies, which is really sad. That's a really expensive hobby. So you should be building, before you even think about publishing, you should be building up a mailing list or something to keep yourself going. There's lots of information about how to get your your name out there, and might be a person to talk to about that.
I think that with what Kirby said, I think it's a different process. And I think first off, knowing your strengths. If you are not a good project manager, like you as a self-publisher, you are now not the talent, you're the project manager, you're the marketer, you're the publicist, like you're everything. And so I think if that's not your strength, if you don't want to manage projects, then self-publishing probably isn't right for you. And I also think that the sales process is very different. You're not going to be getting publicity, honestly, for self-published books, except for some nonfiction exceptions. But if you're self-publishing fiction, you're not going to have a New York Times review. You're not going to be on the Today Show. You're not going to have all those things, which is totally fine. But it means that you are going to be tasked with building the audience. There's not going to be a media outlet putting your name out there for you. And so if that makes you feel really icky and you don't want to do that, then yeah, self-publishing isn't for you, but there's plenty of people who do it really well and make a really good living off of it.
Right.
Okay. And then Sanchita is curious, if you're writing series, is it helpful in the query to put that out there, even if you don't have a second book? So let's say you have book one, it's polished, it's what you're, like as Kirby said, until you're sick of it. Is it helpful to say that you envision it as part of a series, even if you haven't written the second in the series?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the main thing is we want to see you execute one great book initially, so not to get ahead of yourself in terms of the pitch, but in the pitch to say that it can stand alone, but there's potential for series. That's usually the key phrase, like in a lot of queries, is to put it that way.
Okay. And can I just add something? I've helped some of my clients write their queries, and I think one thing that you really want to show is that you're a serious career person. This isn't your only shot. That this is what you do. This is all you want to do. That you're hungry as like a starving lion kind of thing. That you're gonna that you're gonna follow the rules. And do it right and be professional, but. They're investing in your career, not just one book. You have to look at it that way.
Absolutely. And so, as we talked a little bit earlier, 2020 has been a dumpster fire of a year, and so there, with thing after crisis after thing after thing. Juanita is wondering that she's heard from some other people that it's not really a great time to be querying because of everything that's going on, and that some authors and agents are saying that that querying should be postponed. Do you find that to be true?
I don't think so, personally. We're still selling books, and publishers have to think kind of 2 years in advance. So the book market has been remarkably resilient, actually, and at least in terms of sales. There are sectors that are struggling, like independent bookstores and new fiction, of debut fiction, things of that nature. But as a whole, it's still proving to be fairly robust. And so they're still buying, and agents still need to work on projects and try to sell them. And so I if you feel like you're done, I wouldn't refrain from querying agents at the moment.
The one thing that I know a couple of agents that have said that after the pandemic started, they were just inundated. Like they were getting like 200 queries a day from people that were sitting around writing books because they weren't working anymore. So if you're just, you have to, again, look professional, however you're doing it. And some agents have closed the doors, but yeah, I think this year is going to create a whole bunch of new books, and a whole bunch of new ways of looking at the world. I think it's exciting in some awful dark ways, kind of like gallows humor, that applied to the publishing world and some other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just have time for maybe one or two more questions. But Angela is wondering about for newer writers who have yet to be published, but have a firm grasp on what the theme is for the book, and that they've started developing their and that the theme of the book that they are writing. Do you have any recommendations or advice for when these newer writers are going back to the revision process and doing their own kind of developmental edit?
I kind of didn't understand the question. Could you say the first part again?
Sure. I'll read it as is. I was trying to make it a little more tight. What would you recommend to newer writers who have yet to be published, but have a firm grasp on what the theme is for the book they are writing and have started developing their manuscripts for review, meaning for sending it out? So if they're in that, like, develop, to polish it, to get like a critique, either it's like for a critique group for beta readers, any guidance or advice?
Get feedback, and the more you work on your manuscript, the less money it's going to cost you, and what I usually do when people send me new clients, I have a lot of repeat clients, so I always have a waiting list, and I have a lot of repeat clients, and so I usually will read the first 15 pages or something and then give them some feedback, and maybe I'll edit the first 5 pages. This is how I work. And there's been a couple people that I've said recently, you're not ready. Like this woman, she had 20 pages of backstory to start her story, that sort of thing. And then it was just really, the dialogue was so long. And I just said, these are the things I think you should start working on. You're not ready for editing yet. And it's hard to say. But yeah, do everything you can. It'll save you money.
Okay. And then the last question for Kirby, which I think is a good one. Stephen and some other people are asking, many times I'll see in an agent's about section that he or she wants a fresh new voice, but then the submission guidelines asks, give me whose books you'd be next to on the shelf. Can you explain how to balance that contradiction?
I think what what's a big red flag is for somebody to claim that nobody has ever written anything like what they're sending me, right? That indicates a certain arrogance, but also a certain kind of lack of awareness of what else is working, what else has been published in their category, or that books that they're in conversation with. I think more than anything, this is kind of circular, which is that element of surprise, right? So when they say fresh, I think when people generally say fresh, it is, taking something in a story in a genre that we've seen maybe before, but adding something new or progressing that forward. And that can be in a number of different ways. That can be in the kind of characters that are used. It can be in the kind of voice that's used, the vernacular, the milieu, kind of in that vein. But at the same time, you're taking elements, nobody's creating in a vacuum. So you're taking elements or things that have inspired you in the past from other works and other writers that are being repurposed in your work, right? So a lot of times when we're looking at queries and we're doing comps, even when we're doing it, it is saying something on the order of, I think this will appeal to fans of Jim Harrison for the kind of sweeping Western atmosphere of it, but with the kind of gritty characters that appear in like a Donald Ray Pollock novel, and you put these elements together and you stitch them together to say, yes, there has been that, there has been that, there has been that, but what I'm doing is putting those 3 things together in that way. So, yeah.
So, I was going to say, like, I think a good example of like a really fresh new voice and approach would be like Karen Russell's Swamplandia. Are you familiar with that? So that sort of just break out because they're just so weird and different and fun. I mean, like that family of alligator wrestlers or something. Never read about alligator wrestlers before. So, but also it was gothic, and it was swampy and it was southern. It had some familiar symbols and archetypes in it too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Well, we're going to send a follow-up email with everyone's website and information. This has flown by and we're already a few minutes late to our next session, but thank you, Kirby and Jessica, for taking the time to answer our questions, and hopefully people can connect with you and continue to, learn about publishing. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having us.